Welcome back, students, to the third part of the Unit 1. So, here let us brush up what was taught in the previous class. So, in the previous class, we studied about industrial engineering. Then, we studied the meaning of industrial engineering. What was it all about? Why is it important to study industrial engineering? What are the concepts behind industrial engineering, what is important in industrial engineering, and how is it related to the various types of engineering like operations engineering or operations management, production engineering, manufacturing engineering. Then we discussed about the definition of industrial engineering, the definition given by Institute of Industrial Engineers, followed by the objectives or aims and motives of industrial engineering. Then we also did the need, why to study this subject, this concept called industrial engineering. How will it improve the quality, the productivity, and how will it improve or promote safety, health, and hygiene, and also how it focuses on ergonomics of workers in a work setup. Then later we discussed about the applications of industrial psychology, as the applications and scope of industrial psychology are divided into three types of factors. First is personal factors, organizational factors, and human factors. In the previous class, we discussed personal factors and organizational factors. Now we are going to discuss about human factors. What are the human factors that affected the psychology of the industrial employees? So, human factors are nothing but individual factors, the factors that are affected at individual level, personal level. They include, first one is fatigue and boredom, next stress, accident and safety, work environment, and ergonomics. So, what is fatigue and what is boredom? Fatigue is a condition characterized by the decrease in output of an activity due to previous activity, and it is directly proportional to the poorness of the output. Boredom refers to the dull, uninterested, and unfavorable state of mind or attitude of a worker towards his work. So, fatigue in general, we can say that when an employee or worker gets exhausted, he will not feel like working. So ultimately, the output will be of poor quality. This is called fatigue. It's a condition, it's a state of mind which is developed because of no interest in the work, or more work is given and then he feels that of not doing it properly. Okay, for the sake of doing it, he'll do it. Then the next one is boredom. What is boredom? Boredom refers to the uninterested and unfavorable state of mind, the attitude which an worker or an employee carries when he feels that whatever work he is doing is of routine, he doesn't improve himself, or if he is not satisfied with the wages or salaries, he feels bored. Next, second factor is stress. What is stress? Stress is a person's adaptive response to a stimulus that places excessive psychological and physical demands on him or her. We usually use this word called stress during exams. You feel stressed to study 5 units in one single day. This often happens with engineering students or any other what graduate students. Okay, so last moment you feel stressed. So why this stress comes into picture and how is it related to industrial psychology? Stress is a kind of mental state that is developed when there is lot of work given and you are unable to complete it within the specified instructions. Okay, so then you feel stressed. So usually employees fall into this particular factor and they perform less. Then The third factor is accidents and safety. What is an accident? When you don't take precautions, then accidents happen. So safety and security measures are very very crucial in developing a factory or an industry. So accidents are nothing but it's an occurrence in an industrial establishment causing bodily injury to a person, which makes him unfit to resume his duties in the next 48 hours. The fourth factor is work environment. It comprises of the surroundings in which a worker does his work. It includes physical, psychological, mental, and social environment. The work setup from the time an employee enters into the industry is called work environment. Okay, then the next one is ergonomics. What is ergonomics? Ergonomics is nothing but the relationship between a worker and its working environment. How best things can be done, how best a task can be performed. A human being and the relation it has with the machine, the relationship which he has with the subordinates, with the superior, everything is studied in ergonomics. So these are the human factors or ergonomics. So these are the various types of factors which are applied in industrial psychology. So going ahead, we will today discuss about the evolution and development of industrial psychology. So industrial engineering is emerged as a profession as a result of the industrial revolution that happened during the 17th century and 18th century. There was a need to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the operations or productions. So Charles Babbage was one of the pioneers in industrial engineering development. He visited factories in England and United States in the early 18th century and began a systematic recording of the details involved in many factory operations. He was performing each operation as well as finding out how much time and cost is required to find out to perform each operation. So he came to a conclusion that higher skilled tasks can be performed by men and low skilled jobs can be performed by women or children. So, therefore, this analysis actually helped industries to increase the production and employ women and children in the industry with lesser wages. Then came Ellie Whitney in the 1765 and 1825. He received a contract to manufacture muskets, and therefore he was the pioneer in the first mass production system. Later, Frederick W. Taylor came into picture, and he was the considered the father of scientific management because he studied on the best methods used to in industry to improve the efficiency. So scientific methods based on based on statistical reliability were tested and applied. Then came Henry Fayol. He was the father of administrative management, where he discussed about the various principles of administrative management, how work has to be allotted, how work has to be divided, how authority, responsibility, and all these imminent factors are important in creating an authoritative management. Then Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, these are the people who are the first industrial psychologists. They actually developed 17 motions, actually basic movements from the human body, which made the work planning an easier task. Okay, we'll discuss in detail one by one. Then Henry Gantt, he developed Gantt charts. Okay, So these are the various people into different domains who contributed for the development of industrial engineering. So Charles Babbage formed the analytical systems to improve the increasing operations and productivity in factories. There was a need for a change, so he brought the change in United States and Europe, and there was a change. Then Frederick W. Taylor improved the methods of material handling. He was called the father of scientific administration. He gave birth to the industrial engineering through his findings. He studied human factors, mechanics, and materials inside the production processes. He developed a system based in the concept of task, reducing dead time displacement in the United States. And he was the person behind proposing work study, time study to optimize the processes. Then later, F.W. Taylor, who is considered the father of the modern operational theory, implanted two important concepts, and those are principle of direction and principle of managing duties. One boss, one subordinate. And how to manage the duties he taught to the people or workers. Frank and Lillian Gilbreth then came up with the idea of hiring personnel at low cost. He also identified 17 basic movements which are called therblics from human body, which made the work planning an easier task. On the other hand, there were studies collaborated to decrease material cost and employee fatigue. This method was used to improve the performance. Then Henry Gantt came up with the Gantt charts. It's a systematic graphical procedure for pre planning and scheduling work activities, reviewing progress, and updating the schedule. The fundamental work that was done during this time was related to economic aspects of managerial decision, inventory problems, incentive plans, factory layouts, material handling, and principles of organization. Then later we can then in after 1920s you can see that there were two world wars, and then things changed drastically. The industrial revolution did that they recognized the concept of industrial process, contributing to big change in the work handling of the companies, with and also the implementation of methodologies close to the introduction of times and movements, establishing work standards for products and services, planning of the processes, systematization. Industrial engineering also evolved in different fields. It contributed to the social, environment, and technological areas. It provided sustainable development. It conceived equity, equitable rewards, competitiveness, and sustainability process. And it was based on ethical, cultural, socio-economic, ecological, institutional, political, technical, and productive principles. So this is how industrial engineering came into existence, evolved. Then, going forward, what is expected out of an industrial engineer or an industrial psychologist? The roles and duties of industrial psychologist. The first one is to advise managers. To advise managers what he has to do, what decisions has to be taken. He can just advise. The decision has to be taken by the manager. The second one is to study workplace environment such as noise level, hygiene conditions, safety standards, timings, production, improvement in production, methods used, techniques used, recruitment process. All these are various things which are to be studied by an industrial psychologist. He is also involved in the training of employees, counseling employees in case of conflicts and problems and issues, create job application guidelines when interviews are taken, what type of people to be hired, teach managers how to interview applicants, what is required when you are recruiting a technical guy, what is required when you are recruiting a person for a managerial position, and also to give psychological test that improves the psychological capacity of an individual at work, conduct market surveys, and also interpret statistics and give proper information to the management so that they take optimized decisions that helps in achieving the objectives of the organization. So these are the duties or roles played by industrial psychologists in a working environment. Next one is, who is a future industrial engineer? What qualities does an industrial engineer should have? He should confront a society with constant changes. He should be dynamic enough, challenging enough so that he can adapt to the changes. He should be a quick learner, adaptable to the circumstances. Then the second one is, he should follow ethics. Ethics and social responsibility are nowadays core to any profession. So he should follow ethical standards. He should practice professionalism in dealing with people and in dealing with processes. He should interact with human production and administrative engineering. So he interacts with people, and when he interacts with the machines or production processes and also the administrative tasks, he should be in a position to balance them all and uh, give the efficient output out of him. He should integrate technological processes. The old outdated methods need not be followed. He can come up with new technological or innovative changes in the setup or the working environment and improve the processes so that the objectives can be achieved. So these are the areas where an industrial engineering should focus in future. Next one is main departments of an industry. A typical business organization may consist the following main departments. The departments may include production, research and development, purchase department, marketing department, human resource management, accounting and finance. So therefore, these are the various departments which an organization should have. Production. In production, the production processes happen. The the product is manufactured, the raw materials are converted into finished products. Research and development, where new or improved products are tried and tested and made and then launched into the market. Purchasing department. In purchasing department, raw materials are purchased, and sometimes the packaging material is also purchased, and finished products are packed packed using the packing material. Marketing, it includes the selling function too. Marketing, it is all about satisfying the customer needs. It is not just limited to satisfying, but now it is also giving them a delightful experience. So therefore, marketing department speaks a lot about how the product is placed in the consumer's mind. There are many marketing strategies that can be used, and many components of marketing concept. Next one is human resource management. It discusses about how people can be the human resources, that is the skills, knowledge, and the various resources concerning to human beings. Human resources can be acquired, then acquired, developed, maintained, and motivated. From the time the employee enters the organization, how he should be given all the facilities, and then how he can be motivated and paid so that he stays with us. So this is a human resource department management. And the last one is accounting and finance, where the finance and the accounts aspects are dealt with, where the accounts, the day to day accounting transactions are recorded, and all the things related to money are recorded, and then at the end of the financial year it is presented so that it could be audited. So therefore these are the six important departments which are basic in any organization. Going forward, the next topic which we are going to discuss is organizational structures. What is organization structure? According to Coombs and O'Donnell, he has defined organizational structure as the establishment of authority relationship with provision for coordination between them both vertically and horizontally in the enterprise structure. It's a system that outlines how certain activities are directed in order to achieve the goals of an organization. These activities may include rules, roles, and responsibilities. Organization structure also determines how information flows between different levels within an organization. For example, in a centralized structure, decisions flow from top to bottom, while in a decentralized structure, decision making power is distributed among various levels of the organization. Having an organization structure in place allows companies to remain efficient and focused. So, therefore, it develops a hierarchy. It develops a hierarchy. Businesses in all shapes and sizes follow organizational structure. They define how the hierarchy or the decision flows. The successful organization structure defines each employee's job and how it fits within the overall system. The organizational structure lays out who does what so the company can meet its objective. The structuring provides a company with a visual present representation of how it is shaped and how it can fit within the overall system. Organizational structure lays out who does what so that the company can achieve the organizational objectives. It also discusses about the chart or diagram like pyramid with the most powerful members at the top and those with the least amount at the bottom. So, a formal organization structure helps and understand what is an organization structure. The main objective of organizational structure to improve efficiency and provide clarity to everyone at every level. That also means each and every department can be more productive as they are likely to be more focused on energy and time. So, organizational structure tells or speaks about what role an employee plays in an organization. So there are few principles of organization structure. The principles of organizational structure. There are many theories related to organizational structure, but there are few principles of organizational structure which followed properly can lead to improvement of the output and smooth flow of the organization. Smooth flow in the organization. The first one is division of labor or specialization. Second one, consideration of objectives. Third, scalar principle. Fourth, principle of departmentalization. Fifth, principle of unity of command. Sixth, principle of span of control. Seventh, principle of flexibility. Eighth, the exception principle. Ninth, principle of decentralization. 10th, principle of simplicity. And 11th, combination of line and staff functions. So the first one is division of labor or specialization. Usually, when there is work given or when there is a task to be accomplished in an organization, it has to be divided based on specialization. So it improves efficiency. A group of individuals can secure better results when the work is divided. It should be broken down into jobs, into single repetitive tasks performed on specialized tools. At higher levels, grouping jobs into manageable units and their coordination can pose serious issues. If the principle of division of labor or specialization is not used, then there will be problem, there will be challenges that has to be faced by the organization. Problems like fatigue, monotony, boredom may occur. While specialization causes great function interdependency among operatives, it also depersonalizes their activities so that individuals find little meaning in their work. If they don't know what to do, how to do, and whether they have interest or not, then definitely they will lose interest. Functional interdependency among work activities causes strains and tensions. Specialization levels leaves to a different type of problems at the executive level. It tends to segment the organization into enclaves of authority and influence. Often executives come to regard these domains as their own empires, which receive their attention to the neglect of the organizational interest. Division of labor is very important so that the work is divided based on the skills and knowledge of the employees, and they are given the same type of work in which they have interest or in which they have the capacity to do, competency to do. So when work is divided based on specialization, the output can be easily achieved, and the output achieved will be efficient too. Next one is consideration of objectives. When an organization starts its work, he should consider the management should consider the objectives. The goals of the company should be established first. Objectives help in determining the activities, what tasks are to be done, what are the uh, what are the type of people we need, and the structure, what type of work can we get from the people. Once objectives are clearly defined, the organizer can conveniently proceed to group activities, delegate authority to individuals to whom activities have been assigned, and coordinate their efforts for better results. Since objectives have a direct bearing upon the organization structure, one should take due cognizance of time and develop and design the structures so as to facilitate accomplishment of objectives. The assumption underlying this principle is that the work forms and means adopted by the organization are acceptable to the individuals and groups. However, in reality, there is often a divergence between individual needs and organizational goals. So, therefore, the objectives have to be considered first. Next one is scalar principle. The vertical dimension of an organization structure consists of various levels of authority arranged in hierarchy from the bottom to the top. Okay, so a Scalas principle, the it says that people at different levels can directly approach people at different levels in different departments. In this way, the time is saved For example, there is an executive working in marketing department and he has some work in HR department executive. So what he can do is, if he goes by the authority structure, then he has to go through the authority. He should first approach his superior, then he has to approach the superior to his boss. Like that, there are many people in line, and finally when the message that has to be passed to the other executive, there will be time lapse, and also the information may be not given in the right sense. So therefore, scalar principle says that when many people are there in the organization, directly they can communicate, and the message can be sent. It holds that organization consists of two or more levels of authority. The bias idea of this scale is that of grading and distributing a characteristics over a series of demarcated units. Each successfully lowers down the management hierarchy, represents a decreasing amount of authority. In this way, the authority principle gets reduced. Next one is principle of departmentalization. Logical grouping of related jobs and functions is quite natural in developing the organization structure. Departmentalization requires analyzing everything that has to be done and determining the grouping in which it can be placed without violating the principle of homogeneity. Thus, the financial aspects of the business can well be placed in one section. The marketing aspects can be covered in one section. The The human resource management functions can be covered in one section, and in this way, all other aspects can be divided based on their activity type. Departmentalization is desirable because individuals vary considerably in the range of activities which their abilities will permit them to perform effectively. Another advantage is that it focuses executive skills on logical and interrelated problems and provides a basis for top management to coordinate and control the efforts of the departments. Departmentalization breaks the work into manageable units. It helps in easily getting back the work. Four possible bases of departmentalization could be purpose, process, product, and place. Departments can be divided based on purpose, like finance department, marketing department, HR department, or it could be product based. Okay, product. If the company is manufacturing many products, then it could be divided into based on the product in which they are manufacturing. Process based, and also place based. If they are spread in a very big region and they have many units, so they can be, the departments can be divided based on that. So therefore, choice of basis is a recurring question and changes as the organization grows or develops. Then the fifth principle is principle of unity of command. A business organization must have a single head, one boss, one direction. The authority and responsibility should be concentrated only in few hands. There should be a single leader. And if there is a single leader, the ultimate source of authority will be with him, and therefore the conflicts will be minimized. There will be unity of effort, consistency of direction, high morale, and effectiveness of coordination, depending upon one executive as the locus of ultimate responsibility. To subject the person to the authority of more than one immediate superior tends to divide his loyalty and confuse his action. If there are more than one boss, then there will be problem, there will be confusion, and there will be doubts. Next one is sixth principle is principle of span of control. The idea of span of control is related to the horizontal dimension of an organization structure. It refers to the number of subordinates reporting directly to the executive. The principle holds that larger the number of subordinates reporting directly to the executive, the more difficult it tends to be for him to supervise. So it is to be admitted that there is a limited number of subordinates a manager can effectively supervise. So therefore, in addition to the numbers, two other variables are also involved. The first is capacity of higher executive, and the second one is the capacity of the executive. Since these variables differ considerably, individual to individual, it is hardly justified to lay down any fixed number of subordinates to be supervised by the manager. So, in this principle, it states that the span of control differs depending on the supervisor and the subordinate. Okay, so the span of control should be defined properly and then executed, and the structure, organization structure, to be formed based on it. Then comes principles of flexibility. Seventh one, in an organization, there are few organizational goals that have to be accomplished. Both the environment and the individuals comprise the organization. To cope with and both the environment and individuals are there in the organization, and they face challenges every day. So, to cope with these challenges and changes, to reach the objective set, the organization should also have sufficient amount of flexibility. A flexible organization is able to withstand pressure but gives way to the demand of genuine change without fundamentally altering the basic functions of the various segments of the structure. The best example here we can give is looking at the COVID-19 pandemic. 95% of the organizations changed their working structure into online structure, where there are online meetings, online conferences, okay, online recruitment, online interviews, online classes, online mentoring. So everything has changed. If any organization is not changing the course to online platform, then they are failing, they are not working, or they are just disappearing. So therefore, flexibility is also a principle which is very much important in an organization. Next one is exception principle. The next very important function is exception principle. The principle implies that only problems of unusual matters should be referred upward and decided at a higher level, and reunite problems should be passed at lower level. The problems which are not important should be dealt at the lower level, and problems of higher priority should be scaled up to the higher level. This principle is based on the assumption that management at higher levels of the organization structure has limited time and capacity. Exception principle is also the principle underlying delegation of authority. If a subordinate does not make decision on problem failing falling within the limits of the authority and consumes disproportionate time than his senior, delegation applies at all levels in the organization structure by forcing a distinction between programmed decisions and non-programmed decisions. Exception principle helps the manager to concentrate on unprogrammed decisions involving new and unstructured elements. Next one is principle of decentralization. Principle of decentralization says that the decision making authority should not be only one. It should be pushed down to the lower levels too. Decentralization penetrates and gives interest to the subordinates. It also have a geographical presence. He terms, like Peter F. Drucker terms geographical delegation as mere administrative reforms intended to relieve pressure. If there are many departments or units in different places, like there is for example, if there's a company which is operating in Hyderabad and also operating in Mumbai and also operating in the whole world, maybe London or Sydney or Melbourne or Beijing. So decisions at those cities regarding their operations can be taken at that level. No need for a centralized decision. So you can decentralize your organization structure. Then the next one is principle of simplicity. It is very important that the structure should be simple, it should not be complex. For organizational planning, simplicity is very important. Simplicity is an appealing objective because it implies economy of efforts. The principle in brief states that it is a desirable to consider simplicity of structure in developing and aiming as to clear cut in structure as will permit doing the necessary work efficiently. As noted earlier, organization structure is not an end in itself. There should be simple, identifiable tasks given to the people so that they perform and achieve the organizational objectives. And the last one is combination of line and staff functions. What are line functions and what are staff functions? Line functions are functions which are directly related to the production, whereas staff functions are functions which are not directly, indirectly related to the production. Like for example, the work of a factory laborer is directly related to the production, whereas uh, an account executive work is not directly related to the production. He's a staff function. So in an organization structure, you have to combine both line and staff functions and prepare a structure that have a balance. Line structure consists of vertical relationship with power to command and execute. Staff functions are auxiliary to the line function and are advisory in nature. On the basis of distinction like this, it is argued that line and staff functions should not be combined in one individual or department. The reason is that they are basic authority relations, combination of which will result in confusion. So therefore, these are the various principles that are to be followed to develop an organizational structure. The above list of principles therefore helps in bringing an organizational structure where authority flows smoothly to achieve organizational objectives. So with this we complete our third part of the first unit. Okay, so these are the various principles. So going back, let us revise today what we have done. Today we have discussed about the various human factors or ergonomics, fatigue and boredom, stress, accidents and safety, work environment and ergonomics, how it contributes or how it is applied in industrial psychology. Then we discussed about how industrial engineering came into existence, the evolution of industrial engineering, what are Gantt charts, what are Therblichs, what are the principles of administrative management, who is the father of scientific management, what did Charles Babbage study, as he was the first person to study the factory and the operations in an industrial sector. Then going forward, we discussed about the duties and responsibilities of industrial psychologist, what he has to do, how he has to advise the managers and train the employees, teach them how to take interviews, take the psychological test, improve their performance, and finally achieve the organizational objectives. Then what is required for a future industrial engineering, how he has to be prepared. He should be professional, he should follow ethics, he should integrate innovation and technology, he should interact with the society, confronts the society with the changes, he should be dynamic, okay, and contemporary in taking decisions. Then we discussed about the various departments of an industry, what are the various departments, how an industry works. As said, as already discussed, there are 6 departments which are very core to any organization. Then we discussed what is organization structure, how it can be built, and on what principles it has to be built. In the next class, I will tell you about the organization structure and also show you how an organization structure is made. Okay, then we discussed about the principles of organization structure. For any product, there are few laws or principles to be followed. In the same way, when an organization structure is prepared for an organization, these are the few principles that are to be followed, and then only you will get an organization structure that will be feasible to your organizational needs. So with this we finish our part 3. Okay, and maybe in the next class we'll discuss, I will show you how an organization structure will be, and also we'll discuss about the various organizational theories. Okay, thank you very much.